Hello, it's Craig and Richard here, and welcome to this Mindfulness FutureLearn course. This is the first of our weekly feedback videos, which we'll be doing each week to sort of sum up some of the key themes that have come up from the week's practice and discussion. We'd just like to welcome all the learners who are with us for the first time from all around the world. It's fantastic, from so many different professional groups and also people dealing with or challenges in life. There are so many different reasons to be here, and students as well. So it's great to have such a varied group and interacting so well as well. Jen and Sherelle, two members of the team, who are going to be a bit behind the scenes working with you on the discussion boards, are going to be providing lots of useful feedback and just helping to summarise the key themes that come up each week, which Richard and I will be addressing. So it's fantastic, and for those of you who are coming back for a second and even a third time, welcome back to the course.
Yeah, we've noticed that some learners are moving through the course very quickly, and of course, we designed the course so that it can be done at people's own pace. So you're welcome to move through it as quickly or as slowly as you like. But certainly, while the information is something that we might be able to digest quickly, a lot of the practices and the practical exercises are things that we really recommend that you take your time to explore slowly over the 6 weeks.
Yeah, so to get the maximum value from a practical point of view, you really need to take time to assimilate that and develop the skills.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, we're going to address some of the things that have really come up as hot topics and questions during the week, and obviously we can't deal with them all. But one of the things, and I think it's really great that everybody's noticing this already, is that just a few days of practicing mindfulness and we tend to discover how unmindful or distracted we can be, and a number of learners have noted that even while doing the mindfulness course, even while looking at the YouTube clips and so on, that the attention's going to other things and
getting
realising
distracted by other YouTube clips.
That's right, at the same time, and trying to watch two of them. So this is actually a useful thing to start to be aware of the terrain that we're working with and how challenging the modern world and environment can be for being mindful.
Yeah, because that was already happening, but now people are starting to notice it, which is a really positive first step.
Yeah, that's a sign of progress. And please do not get critical over yourself of noticing distractibility. That's actually a really useful sign.
Yeah, but it has brought up an interesting question for some learners who've raised the idea or the point that sometimes when they're in that distracted default mode, they do actually come up with creative, useful ideas, and sometimes daydreaming is pleasant and useful. And the point of mindfulness isn't, of course, to stamp out any kind of thoughts of the past and the future. Of course, we have to plan and remember, and it sometimes pays us to daydream or to let the mind wander a little bit. But we want to have some awareness around that. Obviously, there's a big difference between planning and worrying, or remembering and dwelling, for instance. And so, if we have some awareness around what our attention's actually caught up in from moment to moment, we can start to make more discerning choices, noticing when we're worrying, and of course, just bring our attention back to the present, which is a useful thing to do. Yeah,
one of the things that I think that's unhelpful about being unmindful is that we go into that mind-wandering mode, the daydreaming mode, which pretty soon turns into the catastrophizing mode, etc., and that we're not even aware that we're doing it. Yeah. And we're not making a conscious choice. It's not necessarily purposeful. But if we're consciously, intentionally, following a line of creative thought, for example, that could be a very mindful thing to do. It's not like, no, don't do that. You've got to pay attention to your breathing 24/7. Using the breathing as an anchor for the attention is a very useful thing. But then cultivating the ability to direct attention to a line of creative thought or problem solving is actually a very useful thing to do. So we learn to use the mind in a different way, I think, if we're mindful.
That's right. And also having an open mindset, what's sometimes called beginner's mind, just letting go of what you think you know about something and approaching it with fresh eyes can be actually really good for creativity as well.
Yes. One of the things I think from a creativity point of view as well is that the clutter in the mind or negative ideas about ourselves and our abilities often interfere with the creative process. So many people will actually find, I've certainly found this in my own experience, it's a lot easier to be creative if we are mindful. Now, a clearer mind, a more engaged mind, and a mind that's able to sift creative or useful ideas from just the dross that the mind's coming up with much of the time.
Yeah. I sometimes think about setting up a paddock. You want the cow to wander around, or you want your mind to wander on a particular topic, but you want to set up some fences, and mindfulness can let us have that sort of paddock so that we don't wander out into that catastrophizing, worrying, pointless kind of thinking.
One of the questions that came up as well is about timing for mindfulness practice. Would you like to say something about that, Richard?
Absolutely. So there's no perfect time to meditate. I mean, as a good heuristic or a good rule of thumb, meditating, bookending the day is a good idea. First thing in the morning, last thing in the evening, just to bookend the day with mindfulness and then have mindful moments in between. Obviously starting the day with some mindfulness meditation makes it more likely that we'll have a more mindful day where we're a bit more present or a bit more aware of what's happening for us. Ending the day, just letting go of the busyness of the day and the tension in the body can be a very useful practice. But what we're doing here is an experiment, and we're really encouraging experimentation and for the learners to really find out for themselves the right time and place to be meditating. Because of course, while it's great to meditate first thing in the morning, if you're at home with little kids who are waking you up and needing things straight away, that's not going to work. Maybe it's on the bus on the way to work, or maybe it's in the car park at work when you turn off the ignition and you just sit there for 5 minutes. I mean, people get very creative doing this kind of stuff. So just keep experimenting and finding a time and a place that works for you. Another
really useful time in the day is as we transition, for many of us, the main part of our working or school day, for example, and then to transition into whatever we're going to do that evening. So, and generally as a rule of thumb, before food rather than after food. After food, tend to get a bit more sleepy, but that's that point of transition to put some space between the main part of the day and then the evening.
Yeah. On the notion of sleepiness, obviously, for a lot of people, that first sip of a coffee in the morning is a very mindful moment. But a question came up about caffeine and mindfulness generally. Did you want to maybe say something about that?
Yeah, it's very often, and caffeine, if we're using things that stimulate us to sort of get us awake and alert, we can get a stimulant effect, but we get a trough afterwards very often. So it's not like, I should never drink coffee, but if we're needing to use stimulants and we're not finding another way of being able to engage our attention to refuel and refresh, we can actually get into sometimes an unhelpful cycle and relying on those things too much. But mindfulness will make us aware too if there's this sort of background tension and this background nervousness and more in touch with our bodies, and that can actually be quite a useful thing to do, and to actually notice that that's there, so we can actually start to choose how much we actually perpetuate that, and when we need to maybe use other things to wake us up and get us alert in the morning.
Sure.
Other than coffee.
Having said that, the legend around the discovery of tea, Craig, was that there was a monk, a meditator, sitting under a tree, and a tea tree, and actually a leaf fell into his cup of water. And when he drank it, he thought, that's actually really good for my meditation. And that's apparently how tea was discovered.
Very good. I learn something every day.
There you go. And specifically about the body scan meditation as well, some questions came up around that because, of course, people, out of our, tens of thousands of learners, people have all sorts of different experiences when they're doing the meditations. And really a key point with meditating and, in general and the body scan in particular is that there's no experience that people are supposed to have.
Supposed to be relaxed? Or
no, well, often people think they should be relaxed or their mind should get calm and maybe devoid of thoughts, and I'm sure a lot of learners out there have discovered that doesn't always happen, right? A few of them raise that they feel tense afterwards, or their mind's very busy, or some of them feel relaxed and warm and all kinds of things. And mindfulness is about getting in touch with what's actually happening in each moment. So if you tune into your body right now and notice that you're tense, that's just what's happening. If the mind's busy, that's what's happening. If the body's relaxed and feels warm, or you've got colours going through your mind, through your mind or whatever, that's just what's happening. And so meditation is about learning to sit with that and just to be more and more present, but not to react to it, not to hold on to it, not to decide it's right or wrong, just to experience it as it is.
Because the next level of cultivating mindfulness is noticing the attitudes and reactions to that.
Yeah.
So if we're noticing something like there are residual tensions or an agitated mind, and then there's a layer of judgment over the top of that, of criticising, and then we might notice that it accentuates it. Whereas if we can cultivate that sort of softening of the attitude, less judgment and criticism, we may just find that it ebbs and flows by itself and creates less disturbance. And this is something we'll be investigating more and more as the weeks go on.
Yeah, of course. Mindfulness and sleep was another one that came up, because a lot of people notice that when they start to meditate, they start to fall asleep. And so, of course, they've already made the link between mindfulness and sleep. And there is a lot of research emerging now that meditating in general, but particularly before bed, for a lot of people helps them get to sleep and improves the quality of their sleep. They have deeper sleep, that kind of thing.
Yes.
Sometimes people find when they do meditate before bed, they actually wakes them up a little bit. So you just have to sort of obviously notice your own experience around that.
Yes. There's been some questions of where it fits in with prayer as well, and sometimes if we're very used to a particular kind of prayer, we can be doing that on automatic pilot. So being able to engage attention with something, and perhaps a spiritual practice and so on, if a person is practicing that in their life, to do it mindfully means to do it with awareness and attention.
Yeah.
Like anything else that we might do.
Yeah. And how long does it take to cultivate a new habit, like being more mindful, Craig? That's a question that came up.
It's a lifelong thing, so I think that probably 80 years these days would be the average lifespan, but I think it's a lifelong thing. In terms of, it depends a little bit. I don't think there's any hard and fast answer to that. It depends on the frequency with which we practice something new, and also the consistency. If we practice something 51% of the time and do the old habitual thing 49% of the time, it takes a long time to change a habit. If we're doing something 100% of the time and it comes up a number of times a day, then that habit will start to change pretty quickly. It depends a lot on our motivation and the opportunities we have to cultivate the new thing. But we will be butting up against our habits of mind and thinking as we go throughout this course. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually just, that's a sign of work taking place.
Yeah. And a final question is, should we be mindful all the time? And I think here we need to talk about, what it means to be mindful. So should we be in the present moment all the time? Well, no, as we've said, we need to plan and remember and think about things. But what we should probably be doing is cultivating awareness all the time to notice what we're actually focused on. So we can notice when we're actually doing something constructive, planning, whatever, or worrying, catastrophizing. And so that's just a very useful thing to cultivate.
Yeah. So this is perhaps all the topics we've got time for today. And we'll look forward to chatting again next week, where we'll be seeing how things are going. And we just really hope that you continue to throw yourself into the course. Stay in touch with Jen and Sherelle on the discussion boards, and we'll see you next week.
Please follow them as well. Yeah.